On Sunday, the 14th of June 2026, Dead by Daylight's 10th anniversary event took place at the Grand Quay in Montreal. It was announced shortly after PAX last year, but Dead by Daylight had a big livestream hosted there to celebrate the game's 9th anniversary. For the decennial, they decided to kick it up a notch and do things a bit closer to home. This offered me a unique opportunity. Behaviour has had big meetups at places like PAX, TwitchCon and Scotland HorrorCon, and many of my creator and community figure friends had been to these events, but I'd never been to any of them myself, so the FOMO was pretty real. This big Dead by Daylight 10th anniversary event was entirely unprecedented, something that Behaviour had never tried before. And anyone familiar with what happens when Behaviour does unprecedented stuff knows it's probably going to be a bit weird. So, a weird event done by a weird company for a weird game in the weird city that created it. You know I couldn't resist. And not entirely because they paid for my ticket. So, I didn't resist it. I flew from my home in jolly old England to Montreal from the 9th to the 19th of June. And from start to finish, the trip was nothing short of absurd. I didn't actually technically start here. I started leaving my home city at 1 in the morning on a coach to London. It got me here at about 5:25 in the morning, and my layover time is about an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm taking a bus from here at 6:45 to the actual London airport I'm leaving from, which is Gatwick. Get me there at 10 to 8 for a flight departure at 11:35. So we'll have had, basically, even by the time the plane actually takes off, I'll have been travelling for about 10 hours. That's before the plane takes off to go to Canada. So I'm going to be a zombie by the time I arrive in Montreal. It's going to be a bit ridiculous. There was so much going on in the days in and around the event. Bars and karaoke and art theft and capybaras and engagement. And the event itself was a chaotic, spectacular, unforgettable day of so many meetings and greetings, side quests and signings, and queues so long they'd make 2v8 blush. I've already made a video about the livestream at the end of that Sunday and all the announcements they announced that evening, but this video is about everything else, about the adventure that led up to that evening. Part of me wants to treat this video as feedback for Behaviour as to what the event did well and how they could improve it should they try more events like this. Part of me wants this video to be a tool that people going to one of these events in the future can expect should they host another in Montreal. And part of me is just vain and wants to talk about all the fun I had while I was away. So this video is kind of trying to do everything at once. Full disclosure on this one, as a member of the Iridescent Creator Programme, my ticket to the event got paid for by Behaviour themselves. They got me a premium ticket, but everything else, that was the flight, accommodation, transport, all the activities I've done throughout the week, those are all paid for out of my own pocket. So, you know, go support me on Patreon. So without further ado, welcome friends and foes, survivors and killers to my Dead by Daylight 10th anniversary Montreal event vlog-umentary. Yeah, that name's fucking stupid. Let's start off by talking about Montreal itself. I was there for just over a week and constantly bouncing around between Airbnbs, meetups, the airport and the convention itself meant that I got a lot of use out of Montreal's public transit network. A lot of my friends used Uber to get around a lot, but I personally prefer public transport where I can. It lets me explore more of the city and live a bit more like a local. This was my lifeline throughout my trip in Montreal. My Opus card that I got from the airport when I arrived in Canada. It costs $8 and once you've got it, you can load it up with tickets that will work on public transport throughout the city, both the buses and the metro service. I got a weekly pass for the first week and a 3-day pass for the second week, and that gave me unlimited transportation on all buses and metro lines in the city. At least all the Zone 1 ones, which are, all the ones I needed. The way I see it, that's a pretty good deal. That was like £16 for the week and £11 for the 3-day pass. I consider that a steal, given that you can ride as much as you like, including the very nice metro line. And if you go to Montreal, I highly recommend you pick up one of these cards. Going around Montreal was relatively easy with my Opus card, but was a bit more challenging without it. The Americans with our group seemed very happy with how walkable Montreal was, but as someone who's gotten used to British city design where streets are smaller and less busy, and aren't full of ugly, giant, dangerous SUVs that you legally can't sell in Europe, I was pretty horrified at some of the traffic management and pedestrian infrastructure, or rather, the lack of it. Looking at a Tim Hortons that's only a few hundred metres away, but across 8 lanes of traffic with no pedestrian crossings for half a mile in either direction, is just soul-crushing, and made me miss the UK only a few hours after arriving in Canada. There was a Canadian Tire and a couple of grocery stores near our Airbnb, and every time I walked to one, I was pretty sure I was going to die from looking the wrong way, at the hands of some Goliath truck driving on the Canadian side of the road, at one of those death trap intersections that have no pedestrian islands for some reason. Whoever designed this bit of the city needs to be given different jobs to do, because this is awful. Like, there's traffic coming in 3 different directions, and there's no island in the middle, somewhere you can stand so that the cars actually come past. You just got to kind of run across the whole thing. That's really, because there's 3 different ways, because traffic can come from this way, or from this way, and there's nowhere to stand in the middle. The one place that you could maybe stand has got barriers in the way. Who the fuck designed this? Are they stupid? Note on supermarkets, by the way, if you're a non-French speaking foreigner, in my experience at least, Maxi is where you want to go. A wide variety of cheap food, all the aisles have English and French labels, and the self-checkouts have English options, so you don't have to make a fool of yourself trying to speak not even actual French, but weird knockoff Maple Leaf French, to an overworked cashier who studied dying in 30-degree heat. Super C was both more expensive and almost entirely devoid of anything relevant in the English language, so that's only for use in emergencies. I was happy to find that travelling distances that would be more challenging to walk was far safer than actually walking anywhere. The urban metro that got you around the city proper was a godsend. Frequent, reliable, generally clean trains with good air conditioning that never seemed to be too busy. Not a patch on the Elizabeth line, mind you, but as someone who had a London Underground phase when I was a teenager, I'd compare it favourably to a majority of the tube lines I'm familiar with. Kicks the Piccadilly line right in the shit pipe, I'll tell you that for nothing. The buses that served the more suburban areas that didn't have a metro station were far less pleasant, however. The seats felt like they were just buckets with old felt on them, and they were regularly overloaded during the day, which made the heat just stifling. Getting anywhere on any day except the Sunday was like going through a horrible French oven, and the underground air-conditioned metro was the only blessed relief from the sweatbox buses or the beating heat on the streets. That's one thing anybody in that week in Montreal will tell you about. The entire week leading up to the event was so unbelievably hot and sunny that I was seriously worried about going to a mostly indoor convention with thousands of sweaty gamers. But the weather actually went miserable and rainy for just that one Sunday, seemingly a desperate attempt to stop us overheating at the event. I'm glad I was at the quay the day before to get these shot to the waterfront area, before rain and a crowd of people spoiled the shot. Oh, sorry, excuse me. But I was also very glad it wasn't this bright on the day itself, because I'm pretty sure we'd all have melted. The rain and cooler weather was a godsend on the Sunday, but we weren't really feeling that blessing yet when we arrived at the quay at 9 in the morning and I went to the VIP line to get into the building. Those of us for whom behaviour had covered our ticket costs were instructed to get into the VIP side entrance, the same one that the media and other guests were using. But when I spoke to the security people at that side door, they searched my bag and, after a bit of dithering, instructed me, frickin' Nick, and several others who'd been given the same instructions to actually go to the main entrance instead and join the regular queue, because there'd been a mistake somewhere and we weren't actually allowed to use that VIP side entrance. Eventually they did relent and let us into the VIP entrance, but it took a while and a direct real-time email from somebody on the creator program to let us in. And in that time, back in the regular queues, I realised there was a much bigger problem with Behaviour's ticket management at the door to the event. Premium ticket holders were supposed to be let in half an hour before the standard ticket holders, so you'd reasonably think that there would be 2 lines, one for premium tickets and one for standard tickets. That was true, but only inside the building. All those people in the giant line out the front of the building were a mixture of standard and premium ticket holders, meaning some folks who'd bought premium tickets and had paid extra to go in early were stuck in line behind people who had to wait the extra half hour. At one point I even heard that people with premium tickets had been pulled out of the queue to attempt to form their own line, but wound up getting sent back into the main queue without having their places in that main queue saved, meaning that in reality they got bumped back significantly for the crime of paying the extra money for early access. I'm not entirely sure how all of this got resolved, but I think it took so long to get everybody organised that by the time they sorted out who had premium tickets and who had standard tickets, it had passed 10 o'clock and everybody was allowed in anyway. So the outcome was kind of redundant. Somehow this would only be the second worst display of queue management at the DBD 10th anniversary event this year, and it definitely put a lot of people in a bad mood for when the event actually got started. In terms of what the convention hall actually contained, I'm going to need to do something that I haven't done in a little while. Draw some diagrams. I fucking love diagrams. There were 2 active rooms that constituted most of the indoor convention space, the ground floor and the upper floor. The ground floor had the front entrance about here and the side VIP entrance here. Photo opportunities with this entity model and a green screen near the entrance. Then along this wall there was this gorgeous immersive screen display of various killers next to the merch table. The merch table is where you got the free shirt that came with your ticket, as well as seeing other stuff like prints, stickers, patches, U2s, the DBD board game, and this rather nice mouse mat that I picked up. My old one was in pretty bad condition. Next to the merch table there were 4 arcade-style claw machines set up containing shitloads of these little Maurice plushies, and you had 3 goes to get one, at least in theory. If you didn't get it in 3 attempts, there was nothing stopping you from leaving and rejoining the line later to have another go. It was only once you actually pulled a plushie that they would mark your lanyard and stop you from trying again, and I don't know anyone who wanted to get a Maurice plushie but couldn't. I hope the official merch store starts selling these at some point, or future events have them too, because they are very cute, and Maurice clipped nicely onto my belt loop so I could carry him around like a survivor charm for the rest of the day. Wrapping around to the other long wall, there was a collection of tables set up to play the DBD board game and 3 PCs labelled indie games. At these tables you could play the 3 indie games Behaviour is publishing under the Misbehaviour label: Mr. Magpie's Harmless Card Game, Don't Fret and Terrible Lizards. This was a really good idea to have PCs set up running these games so you could give them a go, giving these games some publicity at a big event like this. And it would have been an even better idea if they'd have actually done that properly, because we didn't know what indie games were actually up there until they'd been revealed at the livestream that evening on the main stage, by which time the indie game stations were closed. As soon as they revealed Terrible Lizards up on that stream, I knew I wanted to give it a go, and was immediately crushed by disappointment when I realised that I could have done so at any point during the day if I had just gone to the indie station to check it out for myself. Live and learn, I guess. Next to the indie stations there was an information desk, the super long table where signings took place throughout the day, and a single lone table containing what I understood to be a very old internal pre-alpha version of Dead by Daylight, made back in 2010 with what was designed initially, at least apparently, to be a split screen experience. This table always looked pretty busy, so I never thought it fair to bother the people waiting to have a go, but this was a really good addition to the convention that I didn't expect to see. There were also tons of props scattered throughout the room for people to take photos with and or of. You had a hook, a generator, a campfire, the Kresu model they took to Gamescom in Thailand and clearly had moved here, and there was even this cool Maurice model as well. You then had a long corridor and an empty lobby area that led to the outside, but off this corridor you had a flight of stairs that led up to the second floor, and this is where the main DBD gaming stations were set up. There were so many PCs up there, several zero-ping LAN lobbies of survivors and killers which I seriously wish I'd had the time to participate in. And at the other end of the top floor there was this amazing concept art exhibition as well. Concept art was there from all throughout DBD's history, including some stuff that we've never seen publicly before, and it was on display all day. One wall was dedicated entirely to awesome pieces of fan art, and there was a table full of pens and pencils tucked away on the side as a make-your-own-art type activity. I used it to make a propaganda poster and then put it inconveniently high on their display wall so it would be slightly challenging to get it down again. There was also the outside area that had the Jason cabin, the stage that Kavinsky played at for the after party, the food trucks, and the big Dead by Daylight sign. But I didn't spend more time out there than I had to because the weather was fucking dreadful and there was lots to do indoors. The event had a lot on offer and it all seemed really good. I was initially worried that they wouldn't be able to think of enough to pack the event with other than the panels, but I was glad to be proven wrong on that front. In fact, there was a bunch of stuff I wanted to do that I didn't have time to, and I doubt anyone could have done everything the event had to offer in the one day, unless they skipped all of the panels. But even that is up for debate, not necessarily because there was too much for one day, but because the shit show at the entrance wasn't the only issue the convention had with extremely poor queue management. So let's go back to the map of the event so I can communicate to you just how bad this queue management was. Hands down, the worst queues at the event were for the Jason escape room, the signings table, and the Maurice plushies, which makes sense because these are the sorts of things that anyone would find compelling, and which ultimately have pretty low capacity at any given time. I didn't even try the Jason escape room because every time I went anywhere near it, the queue just looked like a static mess. I could have spent hours in that queue. I know for a fact that some people did spend up to 3 hours in that queue, and that wasn't a level of time I could justify spending for a single activity. And that is a real shame because I absolutely love escape rooms, and would have loved the chance to take part in one. However, I understand that this is inherently a low-capacity activity, and huge queues were going to be inevitable here. Unless you've been setting up multiple escape rooms and have enough spare staff and space to run them all at once, you're only going to be processing one small group of people at a time in the most interactive and unique activity on offer at the event. That is going to be a recipe for gigantic queues no matter how you slice it. But there were definitely some problems that should have been foreseen. Some obvious, glaring grinding points that slowed the day down and didn't need to exist. And there is no more obvious a display of this than the shit show at the signing booths. So the line starts there, it winds all the way up here, and all the way back down. So, the way the signing booth worked is that for an hour and 15 minutes each, a group of 4 behaviour people or affiliated creators or whatever would turn up at the signing booths and do a little meet and greet type thing with the attendees. They'd get a photo or they'd get something signed, normal convention panel stuff. There would always be 4 people at once here. One of them was, let's say, Matthew Cote, Death Dorks, Eric Pope and Dave Richard. One of my missions when I was out there was to meet Dave Richard. I had friends who met him at PAX last year, and I was absurdly jealous, and I built my channel talking about Dead by Daylight lore. I wouldn't be doing what I am today if it weren't for the world that Dave Richard built, and his early vision for DBD's world, tone and characters. I even emailed ahead of time to try and get an interview with him while I was in Canada. Never got anywhere though. Can't blame him, he's been a busy bee lately. All the same, I got into that queue to see Dave, Matthew, Eric and Dork 20 minutes early, just to give myself the best chance of getting to that table. I skipped out on the second panel to go to this signing, and I waited patiently in the line for almost 2 hours. And I got about a metre, 2 metres away from the signing table before time ran out and they upped sticks and left. To those panellists' credit, they overstayed the posted time by about 15 to 20 minutes to try to get through more people, and it still didn't get to me. And there were a lot of people behind me too. A huge number of people stood in queues for the best part of 2 hours to not see anyone at all. Wait, I'll tell a bit of a lie here. A huge number of people didn't stand in queues for 2 hours. A huge number of people stood in a queue. Singular. 1 queue for 4 people. We're starting to understand the problem yet? Let's say, for instance, each meet and greet took 90 seconds and you've got 100 people in the queue. Getting through that queue, 1 person at a time would take 9,000 seconds, or 2.5 hours. But you've only got an hour and 15 minutes for the entire panel before everybody has to go, meaning the first 50 guests get to meet all 4 people at the big table, and the 50 folks at the back have just wasted almost half an hour just to not see anyone. And that's excluding any additional time waited by getting there before the panel opened. The way this should have been run, at least in my opinion, is 4 separate queues. 1 for each person on the signing panel, with each guest choosing their favourite of the 4 people to meet and joining the appropriate queue. That way the throughput of the queue is quadrupled, because assuming equal distribution of people, there's 4 meetings going on at any one time compared to just 1. At the same 90 seconds per meet and greet, you'd get through 100 people in just 45 minutes, meaning you could spend longer on each person if you wanted to, or have some wiggle room if some lines are longer than others. You could even have some folks see 1 person early, join the back of the queue for someone else if they wanted to, and have a far better chance of seeing the second person as well. It would be a far more equitable and efficient use of the limited available time. There would also be a lot more practical bonuses to having 4 queues rather than 1. It means, for example, if one panellist has a free enough schedule that they can arrive early or stay late to their panel, they can get through more people in their individual line without needing 3 others to line their schedules up to all man the table together. You could stagger the arrivals of panellists to more easily line up with their personal schedules and keep queues moving throughout the day, and smaller, faster queues for smaller one-man panels wouldn't require a giant table in the middle of the convention hall with a huge, mostly static queue clogging everything up. Back to our map for a moment. The biggest 3 queue generators in this room are the merch table, the Maurice claw machines, and the signing panel, and this meant a lot of people congregated in this room at any one time. When there wasn't a signing on, this was not too bad, because you still had this avenue you could walk down to traverse the room. But when there was a signing on, the queue swelled on both sides of the room, to the point that getting from one side to the other was an intimate affair, shall we say? To be fair, I'm a big guy and I was carrying a lot of stuff, so it might have been a bit of a tighter squeeze for me than it would be for somebody else, but it still made getting through that room a daunting task, especially when the giant signing queue barely fucking moved. 4 smaller queues at 4 smaller signing booths would not only process guests faster to prevent such queues from building up, it would also be easier to divide up or distribute into areas that were less packed out by other queues to prevent a clog like this from occurring in that particular space. Each panel had 4 people, so this should have been pretty easy to organise. Just number each panellist 1 through 4 and have people get in the appropriate queue to see the panellists they want to see. But instead, we got a masterclass in how not to manage busy queues for a major event. And while this is an understandable mistake to make, given this is Behaviour's first proper in-person event that they've run themselves, this is a mistake you absolutely cannot make, because it leaves huge numbers of people, possibly a majority of people who try to go to your signings, feeling like they've wasted their time. I want to emphasise here that there's a lot that I wanted to do in the almost 2 hours I spent queuing for a meet and greet that I ultimately didn't even get to do. I wanted to go to the gaming stations and be the only person playing Skull Merchant ever at a big Behaviour event. I wanted to go to the panel that was going on at the same time as the signings. Arguably that was the panel I wanted to go to the most. I wanted to check out the indie station or see if the Jason escape room had become more manageable. But seeing Dave Richard was on my little personal side quest list for the day, and I was willing to sacrifice those things to see him. So the fact that I didn't get to in the end and gave that time up for nothing really sucked. And if someone was going to this event on their own, that could have been an even more demoralising experience. However, I will say, what the ticket actually got you when you weren't waiting hours to not attend a meet and greet was pretty good. Event security seemed pretty legit. I wonder what might have caused that. And talking to my friends who'd been to TwitchCon in previous years, they said Behaviour's outside security firm they'd hired for the event were far better than TwitchCon security. The amenities and complimentary goodies were also far better than I expected. Your price of admission obviously got you entry, but you also got a shirt, a Maurice plushie effectively guaranteed from those claw machines, and a goodie bag containing a unique cover copy of the first Hillbilly comic, 2 patches and a code for the Jason chapter. Premium ticket holders got 2,250 Auric cells, a unique charm for the 10th anniversary, and a Golden Trapper U2s signed by Matthew Cote and Dave Richard bundled in as well, to go along with early access to the event of course. There was a major concern that I had going in, that the ticket price was just going to be the start of the escalating costs. You end up having to pay extra for bottled water or use of the photo booths or signings or whatever. You know what conventions are like. Most con operators will nickel and dime you for anything they can, and some stuff they probably legally can't too, just because they'll get away with it. So I was worried Behaviour would do the same. Drew a bunch of little charges on everything, but I am pleased to report this was very far from the case. Throughout the day, or at least the first half of it more or less, metal tubs of soft drinks placed in ice were set out so people could stay hydrated, kind of like you often have at festivals. There was a water fountain near the toilet so you could refill your water bottles, all the photo ops, gaming stations, signings, the Maurice claw machine and the Jason escape room, even the after party with Kavinsky, everything was all wrapped up into the price of your ticket. There was even a free popcorn machine that ran out pretty quickly from my understanding, so I'd say in terms of amenities and goodies the ticket was definitely good value for money. The only extra stuff you paid for was merch you got from the merch table and anything that you bought from the food trucks, which seems pretty fair to me. I didn't get anything from the food trucks myself. The queue seemed way too long to justify waiting it, and I anticipated as much, so I had a pretty big breakfast before I left, but it does mean that I can't give testimony as to how good the food trucks were or whether they were worth the money. But I did buy a mouse mat from the merch store, and I can attest that that at least feels like it was worth the extra expense. This was just under $70 Canadian, so about 35 of Count Binface's crisp English pounds, and I can safely say it feels like a quality item. Definitely nicer than the Steel Series mouse mat I was using before. It's big, it feels nice and hard wearing, and it's got pretty lights and nice art on it, so no complaints from me, especially for that price, although time will tell if it holds up. The t-shirt they gave you with your ticket also felt like a good quality item. It doesn't feel cheap or thin or plasticky, so I'm inclined to say that if you went to the merch table, you probably got a pretty decent deal for your money, especially if you're a foreigner enjoying the favourable exchange rates. That's actually something that I think needs to be borne in mind when I'm talking about my trip. Throughout my adventures in Canada, the exchange rates were extremely favourable to me, and I was able to buy things for incredibly cheap compared to the costs I'd pay back home in England. This is on top of the fact that as an iridescent member of the Creator Programme, I got my premium ticket itself paid for by Behaviour. So even though as a foreigner getting into the country and staying in Montreal was far more expensive than someone who lived more locally, the actual costs of stuff outside the flight and Airbnb were pretty minimal. £11 for 3 days of unlimited bus and metro travel on the Opus card, for example. Like, that's a pretty good deal when here in southwest England where I live, I'd be paying £6.50 for a day's use of the local buses in my much smaller town, with no metro or other public transit options for that price. Beyond the goodies in your bag and at the merch store, even though I didn't have time to do a lot of what I wanted at the convention, the stuff that I did was still a good time. The concept art exhibition was amazing, and making Ajit prop in the doodling corner was a good laugh if nothing else, but a large amount of the time in that day was taken up with the panels. Between the 2 panels I went to at 1 and 4 PM, the cosplay showcase at 5:30, and the livestream that started at 8, I spent a huge amount of my day at that main stage, which combined with the nasty queues meant that I did unfortunately miss out on a lot of the stuff I wanted to do throughout the day. I went to the first and third panels of the day, the ones about integrating a license into the game and DBD's music and sound design respectively, which were both fantastic. Michelle April is someone any invested DBD fan will be familiar with. He's been the game's composer since the beginning and has been one of the most consistently exceptional creatives the company has ever had, so seeing him able to fully talk about the process of making music was enlightening. The panel about integrating an IP using Jason as a case study was also really cool. I take the process of adapting a horror property into DBD very seriously, as many of you will know, and having a couple of folks there from the Jason Universe team was amazing. Well, one of them was amazing. The 2 representatives from Jason Universe were Sherry Conn, Chief Marketing Officer at Horror Inc., and Robbie Barsamian, Executive Vice President of Horror Inc. and the son of Rob Barsamian, Horror Inc.'s president and a producer on much of the more recent Friday the 13th stuff. Sherry clearly knew her shit. She's been a marketing executive for various companies for a long time, and she's clearly good at what she does. She knows the brand, knows the appeal, and was clearly a key point of contact for the folks at Dead by Daylight. I'm not so convinced about Robbie though.
About 46 years ago, my grandfather and his 2 best friends started the Friday the 13th franchise. They used to own movie theaters and drive-in theaters and then started making their own movies. And so we produced and funded the first 8 films ourselves. We didn't really know what we had when we started. And when my grandfather got sick, my dad ended up stepping in and we did another 4 films, and then a video game in 2017. And then, you know, I got involved in our family businesses, and this was something I really wanted to reinvigorate and bring a lot more life into the franchise.
He talked a lot about we as if he'd been part of a lot of these historical Jason projects. Like, we did another 4 films and then a video game, which didn't sit quite right with me when you do a bit of research and realise why he didn't mention the year that he joined Horror Inc. as its executive VP. He's talking about how we made 4 films and a video game, and his father Rob Barsamian has been on the Friday production team since part 4, so I'm sure he's got some stories to tell, but Robbie's only been part of the Friday the 13th team since 2022. 5 years after their last interesting project, and only 4 years while sitting on this panel. You see how this whole talk of we doesn't quite sit right with me. One of my ambitions in the deep dark someday is to make my own horror films. I don't think I'll ever pull it off, but I would love to be a proper horror filmmaker of my own someday, and I take the proper accreditation of artists very, very seriously. So when I hear all this talk of we did this and we did that, from a guy who by all accounts didn't do anything, it eats under my skin a bit. It's stolen valor from the people who actually did that work, and I'd much rather hear from his father or somebody else who actually made these movies, or did some work on Crystal Lake or Sweet Revenge or something, than whatever Robbie's supposed to be doing here. To be fair, I think everyone kind of knew Robbie didn't need to be here. Sherry answered most of the questions and did so competently, while Robbie just kind of repeated what Cote and the others had said earlier, or occasionally gave us these gems of wisdom like Jason Universe is about Jason.
And so we built the Jason Universe really to house all new content for the franchise, whether it's entertainment, collaborations, merchandise, experiences, and with really a focus all around Jason, what everyone wants to see more of. So that's...
Hell yeah.
I had nothing in particular against the guy, I'm sure he's lovely, but Robbie could have been replaced with a potted plant or a cardboard cutout of Otstava and would have been a more memorable addition to that panel. There was also the unofficial 4th panel, the cosplay showcase that took place immediately before the anniversary broadcast in the evening, and that was fucking brilliant. So many incredibly talented cosplayers strutting their stuff on that stage. So much creativity and skill on display, and I think it brought a lot of people together and got them in a very excited mood in preparation for the livestream that followed. And I think the fact that arguably the biggest highlight of the day was a showcase of community talent is not a coincidence, because more than anything Behaviour could have ever put on themselves, one thing I cannot express to you is just how often I was stopped by fans or fellow creators throughout that day, and to a lesser extent throughout my entire week in Montreal. I started off trying to keep count of how many times someone would ask me, like, oh wait, are you Pixelbush? But I'd already lost count by midday on that Sunday. It must have been like 30 to 40 people who stopped me to take a photo, wanted me to sign something. One person, I believe it was Spooky, one of the artist cosplays at the event, gave me this friendship bracelet, which I basically haven't taken off since the event. It was even happening in the street, just people in the area, presumably for the event, stopping me in public to say hello. It even happened when I ran into Ollie Bot at the check-in desk at Heathrow Airport, and again at departures when I was flying back from Montreal. There has been this odd fellow following me around, and I'm rather jealous because he didn't get like harangued at airport security. This is a wonderful man whose name is Ollie, and he is also going to be there. There is going to be havoc. I'm a little bit scared that the people in the queue are speaking French, and not even proper French, just like weird BTEC French. And every single one of these interactions, whether it was with someone I knew or just a random viewer who wanted to say hi, would have been enough to make my day by itself. Because we so often have this perception of the community as being rude or stupid or cruel or ignorant, and all of those things can be true at times, but when you're seeing all these people who are just happy to be here, drinking in the spirit of it all, it is impossible to ignore the DBD community is full of really cool, really friendly people who made this event more than anything Behaviour could have done by themselves. That's not even considering all the cool creators that I got to meet. There was obviously my creator friends I went out specifically to see. I played Magic the Gathering with ZM Pixie and Vampire Toothy. I tried Pokeball for the first time with Horsera. I shared an Airbnb with Scooty Booty for the best part of a week. But even beyond that, I got to meet so many cool people. People I only know through YouTube thumbnails, inconsistent Twitch schedules, and maybe a Twitter bio. Off the top of my head, we've got Frickin' Nick, Asimovs, Punkster, Astral Nest, Ghost Anonymous, Comfy Cheeks, Indigo Ninja, Lilith Omen, Spooky Loops, Rapid Main, Polyester, Grimorium, Field Agent Reaper made Snickerdoodles, Ots gave me a hug, and Hen stole my fucking pen. I'm not joking about that, by the way. I brought a big box of paint markers with me to Montreal so that I could sign stuff and get other people to sign my stuff. And when I asked Hens to sign something, he asked if he could keep the light blue one for the day, since it was the exact same colour as Hens' blue branding after all. I get a message a couple of hours later on Discord. Hens has lost the pen. So someone out there who was at the Montreal event and came away with a light blue paint marker has got my pen. To be fair, it is a nice pen, so I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you've learned never to trust tall German men with your stationery. They will betray you. Leaving thieving German bastards aside, only joking, love you Hens, I think it's easy to forget that a lot of people who enthusiastically participate in this community are devs themselves. The company as a whole is prone to some pretty horrible mismanagement. The people at the top are as trustworthy as Nigel Farage's bank statements. But it becomes clear once you talk to the people on the ground, actual workers putting this game together, that they really care about what they do and the community they're doing it for, at least for the most part. I got to speak to programmers, community managers, moderators, designers. I ran into designer Jeff, who's been handling Skull Merchant for a long while now. I met Justin, the brand manager, who's just lovely and has done way more for the artistic side of the game than anyone could have given him credit for. I met the other Justin, who I think just kind of got confused and wanted me to go away. Those two guys I got a photo with here are members of DBD's narrative team, writers for the game who I've had a long conversation with about lore and writing and everything. These are people responsible for writing the characters and maintaining the universe I've built my online presence and career around, and talking with them just felt phenomenal, a real highlight of my week. Will and Mitch, I love you guys. You might have noticed I don't have too many photos with people. I have quite a few, but not as many as some folks do, and a fair few of the photos in this video were photos that other people took with me, not the other way around. But I did get a special memento of my time in Montreal, but I intend to share it with you, and it's only a little bit water damaged. Gotta get some context first though. You know those Hillbilly comics they've been putting out for a few months now? Well, Titan Comics, in their immense kindness, have been sending me review copies of these Hillbilly comics for a while. I'm working on a review, and the comics are really quite good. I'm putting it out when the 4th and final issue hits, but by the time I went to Montreal, only 2 had been released and sent to me. But they did send me a lot. I got sent a full variant set of each issue, which is a shitload of comics, especially for the first issue, and I thought, once my review is done, I'll have a load of comics that I mostly don't need, so why not do something nice with them? So, I took a bunch of comics with me to Montreal with the intention of getting as many creators and devs as possible to sign them, so I can do a charity auction when I get back. And I got a lot of signatures. I brought 10 Hillbilly comics with me alongside the 4 Legion comics from my personal collection, and a load of people signed them. Otts, being the gentleman that he is, insisted on signing 5, but there was a problem. It was very rainy that day, and many of the comics wound up somewhat water damaged. This was a real heartbreaker, but I've done my best to fix it. The comics were dried out page by page to ensure they could still be read, and I've ironed and flattened the comics while they're wrapped in cloth to straighten them out, and I've changed the severely water damaged sleeves they were in as well. Hopefully you're still interested in picking them up in my charity auction. My charity of choice is the Mankind Initiative, who run a helpline dedicated to men suffering from domestic abuse and violence, and advise local authorities here in the UK on issues affecting male victims. About 1 in 3 victims of domestic abuse in the UK are men. The real number might be higher because it's so underreported, but male victims get a tiny microscopic fraction of the support given to female victims, which, if you know how undersupported female victims of domestic violence are, should paint a pretty grim picture of just how bad it gets for male victims. Their annual bill for running that helpline is just £60,000, and with zero government assistance and rates of domestic abuse rising nationally, anything I can do to shove a little bit of support their way, I'm happy to do. I don't know how much these comics will sell for, but it's worth a shot. It's an issue pretty close to my heart, and they do so much good with such little money already. Anything we can do to help would be amazing. Besides, the Hillbilly story is one of an isolated young man liberating himself from abuse because nobody else will help him. It seemed fitting. There'll be more news when my review comes out, so hold out for that. As I look back on all these signatures, it all comes flooding back to me just how special all of this was. It was a truly amazing experience on that Sunday at the Grand Quay. It was a day unlike any other, and even if I'd have just come for that day, I'd have still felt like it was worth the trip over from the UK. I felt so lucky to be there, to be around all these cool people, and to be there in the flesh for the 10th anniversary of the game that changed my life. Yes, lucky is definitely the term, because there's something I'd like to emphasise here. I was exceptionally, extremely, beyond belief lucky to be there having as much fun as I did, because there was almost no condition where I couldn't have enjoyed myself. Cassie's just having fun with the microphone. This event had its fair share of flaws, but due to who I am, how and why I'd come, and the people I'd come with, I was mostly insulated from these flaws. I came to the event with friends who I routinely reconvened with throughout the day. I'm a moderately well-known community figure, so I've always had people who wanted to talk to me, take photos with me, and get me to sign stuff for them. And I had multiple side quests too that kept me busy throughout the day as I tried to track people down to get signatures, and attempt to hunt Dave Richard with a net. And that meant that the event's biggest problems didn't really affect me all that much. All that being said though, I can't help but think that if I wasn't who I am, if I didn't have the friends I was messing around with and have devs and fans and creators to talk to throughout the day, I might have felt a lot worse about buying my ticket. And that's just not right. It's not something I feel okay brushing off just because I had a good time. And I only felt even worse about enjoying the event when I got back and learned something that kind of broke my heart a bit. A really exciting part of the build-up to this event was seeing all the promotion for it dotted throughout the city. There were posters at bus stops and metro stations all throughout Montreal, including this extremely unfortunate one placed near a suicide awareness poster. And there were these 2 heavily publicised murals in downtown Montreal. The Montreal Mural Festival in 2026 saw 2 Dead by Daylight themed murals in Saint Laurent, and they were drawing crowds, including people that I'm willing to bet have never played DBD in their life and never will. However, there was one major issue with all this promotion and the big murals in the city, but it's one nobody realised at the time. When Otts put out this video about the event, this artist Philip noticed that one of the murals contained a painting of Feng Min that seemed conspicuously close to a piece of fan art they'd made several years prior. fan art that happens to be one of the top results on Google when you image search bunny fun. This absolutely fucking reeks. At least one of the 3 muralists who put this piece together straight up copied Philip's art, and that gets even more odious when you realise that Behaviour was selling prints of the murals at the merch table in the convention on the Sunday. As soon as this became public, I spoke to the artist and have been in contact with him ever since, and it at least sounds like it's been resolved in a way that Philip is comfortable with. I'm not going to talk too much about the resolution and the details here, that is between Philip, the muralist, and Behaviour, but what I can say is that there has been contact, Philip is okay with how it's been resolved, but it still sucks that it happened at all. Be that as it may, this was only a drama awaiting us when we got back, and there were bigger things to worry about than some art that nobody could have had any idea whatsoever was, stolen. Because I had a bigger problem. This event was going to have thousands of people, many of whom would know me, know my face, or know my work, or at least think they know me in a very parasocial, YouTubery sort of way. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not exactly what you'd call a social butterfly. 90% of my social time these days is just with Cassie, who's not exactly a sparkling conversationalist or a high-intensity companion. And going from a little scaly tube I fill up with rats every week, to thousands of people in a foreign country, across the Atlantic Ocean where everybody speaks weird maple French, it's a big jump, and I wasn't sure how I'd be able to handle it. Of course, I've got a bunch of people out here I do already know, friends I've made over the years creating content, as well as my fellow Brits Connell and Jade, who I met up with several times before. They wound up getting engaged, by the way, at the Montreal Biodome on the Monday after the event. Congratulations, you two, I will see you at the wedding. But the prospect of being around thousands of strangers, any of whom could identify me at any time, was still pretty scary. Part of me expected to get punched in the face by somebody who'd been 3gen'd by Steam9i 3 years ago and was still moulding about it. So I decided I needed a bit of exposure therapy. I'd try and do as much social activity with people I didn't know as possible in the days leading up to the event. After all, if I couldn't handle a few dozen streamers and mutuals, how could I handle thousands of people in a packed out convention hall? That meant I found myself at a bar crawl on Friday night and a karaoke bar on Saturday. Bear in mind that I don't drink, so I was doing this shit on hard mode, just raw dogging social interaction. And for the most part, I had a way better time than I expected to, because as it turns out, the DBD community is full of lovely people. The Irish bar we went to was a lot. It was very loud and very packed, and I don't know if you can tell this from the picture, but I was slowly congealing into a pile of goo and dreading the rest of the night. But everyone was lovely, and once we moved somewhere less overstimulating, I felt a lot better. That's where I met a bunch of streamers and other fellow creators before the event, and it relieved a lot of the pressure I was feeling earlier in the week. Spending time with all these cool people was amazing, both in and out of the event, but there was one other problem. A dark cloud hanging over the whole week that built up until the Sunday, because one of these people in these photos couldn't go to the event. They wanted to, they had the time booked out and bought their ticket and made preparations to go, but 4 days before the event, Behaviour sent them an email cancelling their booking, saying they couldn't come for some nebulous and questionable reasons. Who here has heard the name Pally before? Pally's been playing Dead by Daylight for as long as it's existed. He made his name mostly playing Trapper for all this time, but I think he's moved on to Jason now for the most part. He's done casting for Champions of the Fog, he's pushing 15,000 hours in this game. He's a real old guard of DBD, but, well, let's just talk to him and see what he has to say about how that week went for him.
I'm Pally. I'm a longtime DBD nerd. I mained Trapper for 10 years, which should probably be studied for mental health purposes. That's about it for now.
So, could you give us a run-up of events from you buying your event ticket up until you got that email?
They announced that they were doing a Montreal event, I think, around the release of Crossu, if I'm not mistaken.
It's about then, yes.
Yeah, and I remember being super excited because I've been trying to go for like Twitch cons for so long that I could never make it, and then all of a sudden the con was coming to me because I live in Montreal, and I waited and I waited. I set an alarm on my phone for 5 minutes before the time the tickets were about to go on sale, 11 a.m. my time. I was going to be at work. I said to everyone, I'm not available. I went off the clock to buy my ticket. Bought the premium ticket immediately, got double charged. They were really good about refunding me the second charge. And I did what everyone does. I tweeted out the "see you this summer" tweet because that's what everyone did. And when that happened, the excitement really started to manifest. I thought, this is actually happening. I'm actually going to meet all these amazing people that have like carried me for so long, to be the person I always wanted to be. I had been planning on buying t-shirts for everyone and, all that stuff. Not buying, having them made, but you know what I mean. Fast forward to Wednesday, June 10th. That day. I'm at work, and at about 4:54 p.m., right before I leave to, commute home, I get an email from the 10th anniversary email saying my ticket has been canceled and I'm being denied entry into the event. And this is only like 4 days before the event. And keep in mind, like, I didn't even see this until about 10 minutes later when I'm getting on the metro. So like I knew whoever was there that sent that email had already gone home. It was sent right at the end of the day. So there was nothing I could really do. But yeah, that's about like the events between the ticket and getting the email.
Like how did it feel to get that email in that moment? And kind of how did you react to that in the kind of half a week leading up to the event?
I mean, when I first got it, I read it over and over. I could not really believe what I was reading. Part of me could, part of me couldn't. Like, as I was reading it, my heart sunk into my stomach. You know that feeling when your heart just sinks. I had to put on my sunglasses in the metro, and you know how dark the metro is, like you're in tunnels. I had to put on my sunglasses because I thought I was going to start crying in the middle of the metro, which, weird, but is what it is. I'd made plans. A lot of people don't know I lost over 100 pounds for this event in under 6 months so I could fit into a suit to wear to the event. And it was gone. Felt like it was all for nothing. Then obviously, like, when it really set in, I panicked. The first thing I did was call Shaders, as you know, because I knew he was arriving. I didn't know you were arriving that day, but I knew he was arriving and we were supposed to go meet up. And you know that because you were there. But when I called him, the first thing he told me was to reach out to Polly and King. And I did, and they did their best. They reached out because if anyone's going to be able to get through to behavior, it's going to be Polly and King. You know Polly and King.
Everyone does.
And two of the kindest people in this community, by the way. So I did, and they tried, and it didn't work, but they tried, and they both wanted to do that for me, and I felt so bad. I felt like I was taking advantage, and then Polly's like, it wouldn't feel right if I didn't try. Polly is like the nicest dude ever. But they still said no, but at least they tried. But later that night, I met up with you and Shaders, and I just, not to glaze you guys for, too long, but we hung out until 2 a.m. And this is with me having to work the next day. If you guys hadn't have been there, I don't know if I would have kept it together. Like there was so much like going through my head. But yeah, that was my initial reaction to it.
You said that on one hand you couldn't believe it, but also on some level that you could. So do you know, and I assume you might have known at the time, what behavior you might have done that would have caused this action to be taken?
If we backtrack to December 2025, I was in the first wave of people to get let into the creator program after, I swear, however long of just dead air about the program. I was in the first wave.
It's about 8 months, I remember correctly. About 8 months.
Yeah. And I was removed within a couple of days. And it's funny because I didn't get removed for anything I had done while I was in the program. I'd gotten removed because of past stuff. It was, and what's funny is the email about the creator program was, I don't have it anymore, but I remember it because my Gmail automatically deletes things after 6 months. But it was eerily similar to the one I received about the anniversary event, like almost word for word, the reasoning. And like I said, it wasn't anything I had done in the few days I was in the program, but it was past stuff. They talked about toxic posts on my public social media. And in that regard, I would say fair. There was a time when I had a history. Well, no, I have a history of not being the nicest person over the years. I never went as far as anything that could, get me banned or anything like that. Nothing like that. But I was, for all intents and purposes, an overly angry, dismissive, and self-entitled, idiot with a bit of a holier than thou complex when it came to having discussions about game balance.
So a DBD player then?
Yeah, you got me. You clocked me right there. I had made a habit of not being constructive with my critiques of the game, which I know a lot of people do, but that doesn't make it okay for me to do it. And just downright insulting the devs at times. And this is like past, like this isn't recent stuff. And I never insulted like any singular person. It was always like the devs as like a unit, you know, like, oh, the devs are idiots type of thing, like along those lines. If this had all been a couple years ago, I probably would have gone completely rogue and lost my mind over it, burnt bridges in the process, and looking like an absolute joke, essentially proving their point, I guess. But that's the kind of person I was. But the thing is, the more you recognize you have an issue, the easier it becomes to like control that issue, if that makes sense. After the last couple of years in therapy and anger management, which I admit I sorely needed, I was angry at the world for a very long time. My mindset on this stuff has kind of changed a lot. I'm more comfortable with holding myself accountable for the way I behaved in the past. I'm not the same person I was. I hated that person. But when I was removed from the program, I understood. And the first thing I did was email them back and let them know that I get it and that I was sorry. And there's so many other people at the time anyway that deserve to be in that program. But they even told me they were impressed with and I quote, the level of grace I was handling the situation with. And because of that, the door was opened in the future for me to try again, which felt great, which is also why the event thing caught me so off guard. But like, that's the only thing I can think of. Another thing in that email that, and this is, I think I talked to you about this previously. It's why I think it was a general email. It mentioned threats towards the devs, which never, never. That's not my character. That's why I think it was a general email that they send to people. And it was word for word the same one I had with the creator program. That hasn't stopped me from gaslighting myself, thinking, I didn't do that, did I? Like, I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but that's all I can think of. And that's the information I have from them. So
if you had a message to send to someone at Behavior who might be watching this, what would you want to say?
Oof. That's rough. That's a tough one because everyone holds on to things differently. Believe me, I know that more than anybody. Like, part of my process was learning to let go of things and not dwell on them. But obviously everyone handles these things differently. If anyone from Behavior is watching, I'm truly sorry. I'm not the person I was years ago. I hate that person. I still have nightmares about that person where I see myself from a third person point of view, which is weird. I love Dead by Daylight, and I wouldn't have been here since the release, in the good times and the bad, and there have been plenty of both. I wouldn't have dedicated my entire brand to the game. I wouldn't have spent nearly 15,000 hours of my life playing if I didn't love the game. I know there was a time when I wasn't the best at showing that, but I truly do love the game. I wouldn't have the entity's mark tattooed on my wrist otherwise. And I appreciate all the work you beautiful nerds put into it. Like, I'm sorry for the person I used to be. I truly am. Like I said, I hated that guy as much as you did. I promise. Like, that version of me is dead.
Good for you, man.
That's why I've put so much time into trying to be a better version of myself that I always wanted to be, which wouldn't be possible without all the friends I've made because of Dead by Daylight. Simple as that.
I'm going to dispense with any pretenses here. What happened to Pally was an injustice, plain and simple. I understand that when you're dealing with a big event like this, that you've got to be careful with security. After all, behaviour and many other game devs in other studios have been threatened with violence before, and at the end of the day you have to ensure everyone's safety, especially your own employees. But anyone with an iota of common sense and threat assessment should have understood that Pally is not a legitimate threat to anyone. The interactions Pally spoke about after his rejection from the creator program affirm that Pally of 2025-2026 is not the same man that he was a few years ago, and whoever sent that email saying the door might still be open for the creator program in the future should have known that. Hell, if just saying behaviour staff are idiots and then dropping ones that you don't like is enough to get you banned from the event, I know somebody who's done that much more recently than Pally ever did. Arguably in a much more cutting way in a video that got 100,000 views, and behaviour not only let them into the event, but paid for their ticket. Yeah, it's me. Back in December, I made a video called The Year Dead by Daylight Lost Its Soul, and I ended the video by demanding the resignation of Remy Racine, the CEO of Behaviour Interactive. I was so disappointed and frustrated by Racine's handling of the company, including the multiple rounds of layoffs over the past couple of years, the apparent undercompensation of the devs that still have their jobs, and the other moments of chronic mismanagement, with the helicopter that Racine allegedly brought and bragged about being a symbol of corporate greed that I've been invoking as a joke ever since. Oh yeah, and I got him to sign a comic. I don't think he would have agreed to do that if he'd have known how mean I'd been about him. From what I can tell, nothing that Pally has ever done has targeted anyone at Behaviour as much as I've targeted the CEO by making him and his helicopter into a months-long running joke, and they let me in fine. But you know what, let's say I'm wrong. Let's say I've misjudged him or I'm being too generous. Let's say that cancelling Pally's ticket was reasonable and necessary and the right thing to do. Why was it done with only 4 days' notice? Behaviour are incredibly lucky that Pally took the whole thing with such grace, and even luckier that he already lived in Montreal and didn't have to travel any actual distance for the event, because let's not forget, Pally got the email the same day that I arrived from the UK. If I'd have been in Pally's position and gotten that email when he did, on the Wednesday, after I'd just flown in for 19 hours and spent over £1,000 on travel expenses for the event that I am now barred from, I'd be kicking up an unholy fucking stink. I'd be setting up camp in the public park outside. I'd be trying to sneak in silly disguises. I'd be up to some fucking malarkey if I travelled all that way just to be told that it was all for nothing. And Behaviour are so lucky that Pally lives locally and was such a gentleman about it. I was this close to making my next video, how to smuggle a man into the Behaviour Montreal event, but then I realised that might be a crime. I mean, if I'm up for doing that crime, Pally probably isn't. So unfortunately, Pally didn't come. No matter how you slice it, the cancellation of Pally's ticket was a complete farce. We're either living in a world where Pally is legitimate danger to everyone, like, actual Pal Qaeda over here, in which case they cancelled his ticket way too late and should have caught on much earlier than they did, or, more likely, we're living in a world where Pally is not a legitimate danger. This entire fracas came about for no reason, and a 10-year veteran of your game got unceremoniously barred for your own 10th anniversary celebration. No matter how you slice it, this was handled extremely poorly, but I think makes the message of this video pretty crystal clear. The DBD Montreal anniversary celebration was, interesting. I had an unequivocally amazing time because Behaviour put this event on. But the reason the event and trip was so good was not because of Behaviour. It was because of the community that they brought together. Obviously, Behaviour were integral to the running of the event. They booked the hall and planned the panels and got everyone in one place. But without that community, it would have just been a convention hall full of props and a mural of stolen artwork. Forget Paulie and King, Pally spent a huge amount of time around various members of the DBD community even outside of the event. Basically everybody I listed earlier and a bunch more also got to meet with Pally, and I strongly doubt that anybody here would have had anything bad to say about the man. He had a good weekend despite everything, and we had a good weekend with him because what made this trip great wasn't Behaviour. It was us. It was you. They made it happen, but we made it special. I have every confidence that Behaviour will try an event like this again. They'll go back to Montreal and run it back for another go, or they'll get the campfire tours off the ground and run some smaller events maybe a bit closer to home. Well, my home at least. And I do hope they learn their lessons from this event. Better queue management, better vetting policies for ticket holders, mistakes that were understandable errors for the first time running an in-house live event like this, but these mistakes absolutely cannot be repeated. But even if they are repeated, even if they do a whole new generation of cock-ups, behaviour are ultimately auxiliary to their own event, because the community is what makes it special. On the day itself, and throughout the week I was there. And I think nobody understood that better than Pally himself. Is there anything kind of specifically you'd like to promote? Any cool things that you're working on? Anywhere that people who think you're an interesting guy watching this video might be interested in finding you?
I mean, if you're truly interested, you can find me over on twitch.tv/Pally. I do have a YouTube channel that I haven't uploaded anything to in a while. Last year was rough. You know, I'll get back to it eventually. One thing I would like to promote is this community gets a lot of hate from a lot of people, but as someone who's been recently exposed to the very best of this community, it gets way more hate than it deserves. Like, I was brought to tears several times. I remember talking to Spooky Loops. I don't even know if he remembers what he said because we were all at a bar, but he had a lot of really nice things to say. And I cried. I talked to Vampire Tooth. He cried several times. I could go on and on. The list of people who showed love to me over that weekend, even though I didn't go to the event, they made it one hell of a weekend. So if I'm going to promote anyone, I'm going to promote the community because they're awesome.